Welcome to Unmasking the Shield. Hi, I'm your host, Bob, and in today's episode, we're going to discuss job burnout. Now, maybe you've heard the phrase, I can't believe I have 5 more years left, or I can't believe I have 8 more years left, something along them lines. I know I've heard people say it, and I'm pretty sure I've said it too. But does this mean someone is burned out? Not always, but it might be a warning sign. Today we're going to talk about some of the signs of burnout, risk factors, and possible ways to avoid it. It's not always an easy subject to talk about, and sometimes uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be avoided either. So what is job burnout? According to the U.S. Fire Administration, they list 3 major components. Exhaustion, things like feeling run down, wanting to lay around on days off, no interest in doing hobbies. Next is disengagement or withdrawal from the workplace or coworkers. Possibly being more isolated or not as social anymore with coworkers, leaving station immediately and maybe not having coffee with everyone. Then the third they list is cynicism or unsympathetic attitude toward the people and goals they serve. Like always finding the negative in a new policy or equipment, or maybe having issues with command staff and their decisions. But if you don't work in public safety or as a first responder, this information may provide some insight and be informative in your profession or career also. So I hope that it's hopeful. So let's take a look at some other signs or symptoms of burnout. Now, job burnout isn't a medical diagnosis, according to the Mayo Clinic, but looking for a medical perspective, I wanted to see what information they had. So, job burnout symptoms. You may ask yourself, have you become cynical or critical at work? I mentioned this earlier before about policy and equipment. But what else could you analyze and ask yourself about how you view or look at work? How about, do you drag yourself in or have trouble getting started? Well, that's why they invented coffee, right? I'm sure you heard, I need another cup of coffee just to function. Or maybe you know the person that hits snooze on their alarm 7 times, 8 times. Or maybe you've felt the dread of just driving into shift. Now, is this burnout? Well, we've all had rough days. But when those days become weeks, then months, and into years, that makes for a rough work life and home life too. Are you irritable or impatient with coworkers, patients, maybe citizens? This is sometimes tough for you to see and recognize in yourself. I didn't. So take cues from your coworkers and friends. Don't be offended if they ask, you seem different. Is everything okay? Or, hey, something bothering you? Again, you might not be as introspect on your subtle behaviors, but those closest to you will notice. Maybe you don't smile or laugh as much anymore. Or you have a permanent scowl look on your face. One of the few complaints I had called in on me was to the shift captain. It was while responding to a call, lights and sirens. The citizen complained of my use of the air horn and that I, the driver, had a fuck you look on his face. I was completely unaware that this was such a thing. But then again, I'm from Jersey, and maybe that's a completely normal look. I, of course, apologized to the captain, and looking back, I can totally see myself doing it. Another question you may ask yourself, do you have a lack of energy? I mentioned this earlier. Are you not feeling as well or motivated as you once did? not being able to get chores done on days off, or just feeling lazy. It's tough because as we age, we go through changes too. So pay attention to your body and what it's telling you. Do you have difficulty concentrating? Maybe you have a tough time completing tasks or being able to focus, or not remembering important details for an assignment. Are you not as motivated as before or don't feel the same gratification as you once did? Do you feel like you aren't making a difference or maybe feel empty inside? Do you feel jaded about the lack of recognition for your service or your department's service? Next one is, this is a tough and ugly one. Are you using food, alcohol, or drugs to cope or deal with stress? A lot of times, people don't know how to deal with things or find help. So unfortunately, many turn towards outside vices to help cope, but don't recognize that they're doing it or think they are okay. This is one that needs to be taken seriously. Luckily, there are programs out there and sources to get help. Have you had a change in sleep patterns? Shift work can be difficult, and even on days off, sleeping is not always easily achieved, and unfortunately, it can take a toll on you. Other problems like sleep apnea or insomnia may develop later on. Another one is, do you have unexplained physical complaints? Maybe new headaches, stomach or bowel issues, or chest pains. Pay attention to any new symptoms and notice if there's any correlation with your work. Listen to what your body tells you and don't be afraid to get checked out by a doctor. Hopefully you took a good listen at those signs. Maybe recognize some in yourself or people you know. Problem is hanging on too long, just trying to get those last years in for your pension. It's a tough predicament, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, let's take a look at some possible risk factors. Being dedicated to your job is a good thing, but there should be balance. One risk factor is that you identify so strongly with work that you lack the balance between your work life and personal life. This becomes taxing on your family life and those closest around you. Be cautious allowing your career to become your only identity. Another factor is high workload, including overtime and extra details. This almost seems obvious. If you're putting in massive amounts of time on the job, it's eventually going to catch up with you, and you're going to get burnt out. Next risk factor is kind of tough to judge because sometimes it's just the nature of the person. That is, you try to be everything to everyone. You want to be the go-to guy or gal that anyone can rely on. Everybody's answer when they have a problem. But constantly worrying about others will lead you not to focus on yourself, especially when you might be going through your own tough times. Now, there are other factors like low wages, heavy workload, being a possible target of violence, lack of social support, and extremes in activity. Just think about how many times you run lights and sirens to a high priority call. The adrenaline dump. Your mind racing and pre-planning as information is being relayed from dispatch. Then straight into action mode, doing what you've been trained to do, almost without thinking. Everything you learned and trained for kicks in. And without having time to emotionally process everything, boom, the call or assignment is completed. Now take another scenario. You're dispatched to any one of these examples. A call for a man with a gun at the park, or a possible 2-story occupied structure fire, or maybe dispatched to a possible teenage drowning. Same thing now. You're running lights and sirens, mind racing, and pre-planning. maybe gearing up. And then you receive information that it's a false call or another unit is closer and will handle. Then almost immediately after that, you're dispatched to another call, but this one less serious. Maybe a lift assist for an uninjured patient, or a call for a disabled vehicle causing a traffic hazard. But you're still amped up. Eventually your nerves settle, and you're back to normal or even keel. You complete that call and ready for the next one. But are you? Seems pretty intense on the body, don't you think? Now multiply that 100 times over in a career. That's quite a toll on the human body. It's definitely a serious risk factor. They say empathy is an amazing human quality. However, it can also drain us too, especially when being overwhelmed with repeated incidents. All of these can lead to compassion fatigue and sometimes just as bad as compassion avoidance. Make sure you're mindful of any of these warning signs. So let's take a look at ways on how to avoid job burnout. Something always good is to accept the advice of senior coworkers who have effectively managed stress throughout their career. Try to seek out those with positive attitudes still late in their career, and don't be afraid to ask for guidance. They've survived this far, so they probably have a wealth of knowledge. Pick their brains and see what they have to offer. Next is having activities outside of work that provide satisfaction. This could be whether you volunteer for a community group like Kiwanis or Habitat for Humanity, or try volunteering as a sports coach for a youth team. Maybe getting involved in a support group, and so on. Equally important is associate with society outside of your department. Don't be afraid to befriend people outside of work. Try getting to know the parents of your kids' friends. Take an interest in what they do for a living and get a different perspective, maybe from a business owner or an engineer. Expand your circle of friends, whether through sports, church, music interests, or any other means. Another way is to maintain plans and goals outside of being a first responder. Don't put things off that you once set out to do or liked in your personal life. Have you ever wanted to learn to play a musical instrument? Or attempt your first 5K? Or had plans to make a home vegetable garden? Well, setting and maintaining goals will help you avoid burnout. Remember, it's very important to have balance. Setting health and fitness goals is also very beneficial. Not only by maintaining and achieving better physical health goals for yourself, this may also help with your mental health and have you more fit and job ready. These are just a few of the ways you can help to avoid job burnout, and every person is an individual and will find their own way. So you may find benefit in any one or all of these things. Just remember to take time for yourself and disconnect from your job, even if for a little bit. Give your mind and body a break. It deserves it. I hope you found this episode informative and helpful. Maybe you heard some things that you can relate to or someone you know, or made you realize that you want to complete some personal goals in your life. That's the intent of the podcast. I wanted to thank all those that reached out personally with your story and shared your experiences. Remember, you're not alone. I would like to end this episode by dedicating it to Officer Richard Link of the Atlantic City Police Department in New Jersey. On August 22nd, 2020, Officer Link was found dead in his car in Galloway, New Jersey. An autopsy by the Southern Regional Medical Examiner's Office determined his manner of death to be suicide, caused by a gunshot wound. Officer Link was only 29 years old and beginning a promising career. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Officer Link's family, friends, and co-workers. You never know what someone is going through. Yeah, they may look fine on the outside, but hurting on the inside. And that's why I wanted to mention the program Cop to Cop. It's a confidential helpline that helps first responders and their families deal with stress or behavioral issues. They have other first responders that are there to talk to. For anyone that needs assistance, please call Cop to Cop at 866-COP, the number 2, and COP. That's 866-267-2267. Thank you for listening to this episode of Unmasking the Shield, and I appreciate all the support. Please like, follow, or subscribe on any of the listening platforms for future episodes. As always, take care of yourself and each other.